everybody. Welcome back to Story Time with Hog. And also, Merry Christmas, because it's Christmas time. Or Happy Hanukkah, or Happy Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate, that's perfectly fine. But I celebrate Christmas, so I'm going to say Merry Christmas. So, I'm going to be reading one of my favorite Christmas stories today. You've probably seen it before, but this seems special. A Christmas Carol. Oh, yes. A story about old Mr. Scrooge and how he discovers the true spirit of Christmas. Well, let's read it together. Okay. A Christmas Carol. The illustrated just for kids edition. Hey, that's you. I like books with pictures. I also like books without pictures too, but books with pictures are, I think, a little extra special. I don't know what you think, but that's what I think. Ooh, that's cool. Excuse my sniffling too. I got a little cold, so I apologize. Yep, even gnomes get sick from time to time. This is about Charles Dickens. I'm not going to read that, but if you'd like to pause and read it, go right ahead. All right, here we go. Stave 1. I don't know what that means. Is that another word for chapter? I'll have to look that up later. Stave 1. Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt about that. His burial registration was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. Scrooge and he were partners for many years. Scrooge was his only friend and only mourner. And even Scrooge was not so sad about Marley's death. He went back to his business on the day of the funeral. Yes, there is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I'm going to tell. Still, for years afterward, Marley's name stood above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. He answered to both names. It was all the same to Scrooge. He was tight-fisted, that old Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, clutching, greedy old sinner, hard and sharp as flint rock. The cold in him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his walk, made his eyes red and his thin lips blue. It was as if frost was on his head, on his eyebrows, and his wiry chin. He was just as icy in his office in summer, and didn't thaw 1 degree at Christmas. Heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm him. No wintry weather could chill him. Bad weather didn't know what to do with him. Nobody ever stopped him on the street to say, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars asked him for money. No children asked him what time it was. No man or woman ever asked him for directions. But what did Scrooge care? He liked going through life like this, warning all human sympathy to keep away. Once upon a time, on Christmas Eve, Old Scrooge sat busy in his office. It was cold, biting, foggy weather, and he could hear the people outside trying to keep warm. The city clocks had only just rung 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were seen in the windows of the neighboring offices. The fog came pouring in and was so dense that although the courtyard in front of the office building was narrow, the houses opposite were mere phantoms. The Scrooge of the Scrooge. I made the mistake. It's okay to make mistakes. It's all right. Where was I? The door of Scrooge's office was open so he could keep his eye on his clerk, who was copying letters in a dismal little room nearby. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't make it bigger, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. So the clerk put on his scarf and tried to warm himself with his candle, though he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, Fred. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" This nephew of Scrooge's was almost glowing. His face was handsome, his eyes sparkled, and his breath steamed. "Christmas a humbug, Uncle," said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas. What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Come then," said the nephew. "What reason have you to be grumpy? You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer ready, said "Bah!" again, and followed it up with "Humbug." "What else can I be," Scrooge said, "when I live in a world of fools such as this? Merry Christmas! What's Christmas time but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer. If I could have my way," said Scrooge, "every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart." "Uncle," pleaded the nephew. "Nephew," returned the uncle sternly, "keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine." "Keep it," repeated Scrooge's nephew. "But you don't keep it." "Let me leave it alone, then," said Scrooge. "Much good it ever has done you." "There are many things that I have found good in, but that have not made me money," said the nephew. "Christmas is one of them. I have always thought of Christmas time as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of when men and women seem to open their hearts freely and to think of all people as equals, not as strangers. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold in my pocket, I believe that it has done me a good, and I say, God bless it." The clerk applauded. Realizing his mistake, he poked the fire and extinguished the last spark forever. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep Christmas by losing your job. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir," he added, turning to his nephew. "I wonder why you don't go into politics." "Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow." "Bah! I'd rather die." "But why?" asked Scrooge's nephew. Why did you get married? Said Scrooge. Because I fell in love. Because you fell in love, growled Scrooge, as if that were the only thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. Good afternoon. You never came to see me before I got married. Why use it as an excuse for not coming now? Good afternoon, said Scrooge. I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends? His nephew asked. Good afternoon, said Scrooge. I am sorry with all my heart that you are so stubborn, but I'll keep my Christmas joy to the end. So, Merry Christmas, Uncle. Good afternoon, said Scrooge, and a Happy New Year. Good afternoon, said Scrooge. His nephew left the room without an angry word. He stopped at the outer door to bestow season's greetings on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them happily. There's another fellow, muttered Scrooge, who overheard them. My clerk, who earns only 15 shillings a week to support his wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas. The clerk, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were gentlemen who now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him. Scrooge and Marley's, I believe, said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley has been dead 7 years, Scrooge replied. He died 7 years ago, this very night. We have no doubt his generosity will be matched by you, his surviving business partner, said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. Scrooge frowned and shook his head. Excuse me. All right, I'm back. I had to get a drink of water. All right. Oh, where was I? All right, there we go. Excuse me. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, we wish to provide for the poor, who suffer greatly. Many thousands need basic necessities. Are there no prisons? asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman. And workhouses? Demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? They are, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not. They are in full operation, then? Said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir. No, I was afraid, from what you said, that they were closed. I'm very glad to hear it. Well, a few of us are working to raise money to buy the poor some food and drink and a way to keep warm. What shall I put you down for? Nothing, Scrooge replied. You wish to be anonymous, for us not to use your name? I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make myself merry at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there. Many would rather die than go to those horrible places. If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman left. Scrooge resumed his work, feeling pleased with himself. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened. The cold became intense. In the main street at the corner of the courtyard, some workers were preparing the gas pipes and had lit a great fire in a metal brazier, around which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze. The brightness of the shops where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamplight of the windows made pale faces shine warmly as they passed. It grew foggier and colder. A child stooped at Scrooge's keyhole to sing him a Christmas carol, but at the first sound of "God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay," Scrooge seized a ruler with such energy that the young singer fled in terror. Soon the hour for shutting the office arrived. Scrooge stood up and told the clerk, who instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat. "You'll want all day off tomorrow, I suppose," said Scrooge. "If quite convenient, sir." "It's not convenient," said Scrooge, "and it's not fair. You don't think that I'm being taken advantage of when I pay a day's wages for no work?" "It is only once a year," the clerk observed. "A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December," said Scrooge. "But I suppose you must be here all the earlier the next morning." The clerk promised that he would. And Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white scarf dangling below his waist, for he had no warm coat, joined a group of neighborhood boys and slid down an ice patch on Cornhill 20 times in honor of it being Christmas Eve, and then ran home as fast as he could. Scrooge took his sad dinner to his usual sad tavern, and having read the newspapers, he went home to bed. He lived in a gloomy suite of rooms. His apartment was old and dreary, for nobody lived in the building but Scrooge, the other rooms being all rented out as offices. The fog and frost hung about the dark old gateway of the building. Now there was nothing unusual about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. But now Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw not the usual knocker. In its place was Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not angry, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles up on its ghostly forehead. The eyes were wide open, but they were motionless. That and its color made it look horrible. As Scrooge looked upon this phenomenon, it became a knocker again. He was startled, to be sure, but he went in and lighted his candle. He fastened the door and walked up the stairs. Up Scrooge went, but before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. All was as it should be. There was nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, and nobody in his robe. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. He took off his cravat, put on his robe and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to sip a cup of warm gruel. He had a bit of a cold, as do I. It was a very low fire for such a bitter night, so he sat close to it. The fireplace was an old one, and had painted tiles all around it. Suddenly Marley's face appeared on each tile. "Humbug!" said Scrooge. He happened to look at an old bell, never used, that hung in the room. To his astonishment and dread, he saw this bell begin to swing. Soon it rang out loudly, and so did every other bell in the house. After they stopped, he heard a clanking noise, as if someone were dragging a heavy chain in the cellar. Scrooge remembered that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. Downstairs, the cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. "It's humbug still," said Scrooge. "I won't believe it." But then it came through the door and passed into the room before his eyes. It was Marley's ghost. Marley in his wig and coat. He held a chain that was wrapped around his middle. It was long, and it was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, and heavy purses made of steel. Scrooge could see right through him. Still, Scrooge didn't believe it, though he saw it standing in front of him, though he saw the folded handkerchief that was tied around his head and chin like a bandage. "You," said Scrooge, nasty as ever, "what do you want with me?" "A lot." It was Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Who were you then?" said Scrooge. "In life I was your business partner, Jacob Marley." "Can you sit down?" "I can." "Do it then." The ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, as if he did it all the time. "You don't believe in me," observed the ghost. "I don't," said Scrooge. "Why do you doubt your own senses?" "Because a little thing can affect them. Something bad I ate, an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. You are more gravy than grave, whatever you are." Scrooge was not in the habit of cracking jokes. He did it to distract himself and keep down his terror, for the ghost's voice disturbed him in his bones. "Still, humbug, I tell you." At this the spirit raised a frightful cry, "Oh!" and shook his chains with terrible noise. Scrooge held on tight to his chair, but how much greater was his horror than the phantom took off the bandage round his head, and its lower jaw dropped wide open. Scrooge fell to his knees and clasped his hands in front of his face. "Mercy! Dreadful spirit, why do you trouble me?" "Man of the world," replied the ghost, "do you believe in me or not?" "I do," said Scrooge. "I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do they come to me?" "It is required that everyone must walk among others," the ghost returned. "And if they do not do so when they are alive, then they are condemned to do so after death, doomed to wander through the world and see what joy they can no longer share, but might have shared on earth, had they only been happy. Oh, woe is me!" "You are chained," said Scrooge, trembling. "Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I created it out of my own free will." Scrooge trembled. "Would you know the weight and length of the chain you bear yourself?" It was as heavy and as long as this one 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have continued to add to it since. Scrooge looked around him on the floor, but he could see nothing. Jacob, he said imploringly. Oh, Jacob Marley, tell me more. Comfort me. I have no comfort to give, the ghost replied. I cannot rest. I cannot stay anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our offices. Now I have no rest, no peace, only the torture of remorse. The ghost set up another cry, "Oh!" and clanked his chains hideously in the dead night, silence of the night. But you were always a good man of business, Jacob, offered Scrooge. Business, cried the ghost, wringing his hands again. Humankind was my business. The well-being of others was my business. Charity, mercy, forgiveness, and kindness were all my business. My actual job was only a drop of water in the vast ocean of my business. Marley's ghost held up its chain and flung it heavily to the ground again. At this time of year, the spirit said, I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of my fellow beings and ignore them? Listen to me. My time is nearly gone. I will, said Scrooge, but don't be hard on me. I am here tonight to warn you that you still have a chance and hope of escaping my fate. You were always a good friend to me, said Scrooge. You will be haunted, resumed the ghost, by 3 spirits. Is that the chance and hope, Jacob? Scrooge demanded. It is. I think I'd rather not, said Scrooge. Without their visits, said the ghost, you cannot hope to leave the path that I walk. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1. Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over with? Hinted Scrooge. Expect the second on the next night at the same time, the third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has sounded. You won't see me any more, but for your own sake, I hope you remember that has passed between us. When Marley's ghost had said these words, it took its handkerchief from the table and tied it around its head, as before. The ghost walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that by the time it reached it, the window was wide open. Marley's ghost held up its hand, warning him to come no closer. Scrooge stopped. He heard sounds outside, sounds of sadness and regret. The spirit, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful sound and floated out into the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed it to the window and looked out. The air was filled with spirits, wandering and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. They wanted to help those around them, to do good, but they could not. Their chance was gone. Soon the night outside returned to normal. Scrooge closed the window and looked at the door where the ghost had entered. It was locked tightly. He tried to say, humbug, but stopped. He was exhausted and went straight to bed and fell asleep in an instant. Stave 2, the first of the three spirits. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking around he could hardly see anything, so he listened for the hour. 12. But it was past 2 when he went to bed. Clock was wrong. "It isn't possible," said Scrooge, "that I can have slept through a whole day and far into another night." He scrambled out of bed and went to the window. He rubbed the frost off with the sleeve of his robe, but could see very little. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold. Scrooge went to bed again and thought it over, and could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more confused he was. Marley's ghost bothered him greatly. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge lay in this state until the chime rang again. He remembered that the ghost had warned him of a visit when the bell tolled 1. He decided to lie awake for the next hour. Finally, the chime rang for 1. "The hour itself," said Scrooge, "and nothing else." But light flashed up in the room just then, and the curtains of his bed were drawn away by a hand. Scrooge found himself face to face with an unearthly visitor. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet also like an old man. Its hair, which hung around its neck and down its back, was white, and yet the face didn't have a wrinkle on it. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and around its waist was a beautiful belt. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and strangely its dress was trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that shooting out from the top of its head was a bright, clear stream of light. It held a cap under its arm. "Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?" asked Scrooge. "I am." The voice was soft and gentle. "Who and what are you?" Scrooge demanded. "I am the ghost of Christmas past." "Long past?" asked Scrooge. "No, your past." Scrooge asked to see the spirit put on its cap. "What?" exclaimed the ghost. "Why would you so soon put out the light that I give?" Scrooge said that he did not mean to offend, and that asked why the spirit was here. "Your welfare," said the ghost. "Thank you," said Scrooge, "but I think that a night of good rest would be the best thing for that." "It is to reclaim you from your ways, then." It put out his hand as it spoke and clasped him gently by the arm. "Rise and walk with me." Scrooge rose, but seeing that the spirit went to the window, said, "I am immortal. I could fall and die. Hold my hand, and you shall not fall." They passed through the wall and soon stood upon an open country road with fields on either side. The city had vanished. The dark night and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold winter day with snow on the ground. "Good heavens!" said Scrooge as he looked around him. "I was raised in this place. I was a boy here." "You remember the way?" "Remember it? I could walk it blindfolded." "Strange, then, that you had forgotten about it for so many years. Let us go on." They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and a winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were trotting towards them with boys on their backs, who called to other boys in country carts driven by farmers. All of them were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were full of merry music. These are only shadows of the things that have been. They cannot see or hear us. As the boys passed, Scrooge knew and named everyone. He rejoiced to see them. His cold eye formed a tear, and his heart leaped as they went past. He was filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas as they parted for their homes. Still, what was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? What good had it ever done for him? The school is not quite deserted, said the ghost. A single child, neglected by his friends, is still here. Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. They left the high road and soon approached a mansion of red brick that housed the school. Upon entering the great dreary hall, they found it to be cold and poorly furnished. There was a chilly bareness in the place, reminding Scrooge of too many mornings, getting up in the dark by candlelight, and often not having enough to eat. They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall to the door at the back of the house. There they saw a long, bare, sad room with desks. At one of these desks a lonely boy was reading near a small fire. Scrooge sat down on the bench and wept to see his poor forgotten self as he used to be. The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his younger self still reading. Scrooge remembered well the book and its characters. Why, it's Ali Baba! One Christmas time, when this solitary child was left here all alone, Ali Baba came to him in a story, just like that. Poor boy. He remembered other characters in the book with equal delight. To hear Scrooge speaking this way, in a voice between laughing and crying, and to see his excited face, would have been a surprise to his business friends in the city, indeed. In pity for his former self, he said, "Poor boy, I wish." Scrooge muttered after drying his eyes with his cuff, "But it's too late now." "What is the matter?" asked the spirit. "Nothing," said Scrooge. "There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I would like to have given him something, that's all." The ghost smiled thoughtfully and waved its hand, saying, as it did so, "Let us see another Christmas." The room became a little darker and more dirty. There he was, alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the holidays. He was not reading now, but walking up and down despairingly. A door opened, and a little girl came running in, and putting her arms around his neck and kissing him, she said, "Dear, dear brother, I have come to bring you home." She clapped her tiny hands. "Home, little Fan?" said the boy. "Yes," said the girl, full of glee. "Home for good, home forever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. He spoke so gently to me that one night that I was not afraid to ask him again if you might come home, and he said yes. He sent me to coach to bring you, and you are never to come back here. But first we're to be together all Christmas long and have the merriest time in the world." She clapped her hands again and laughed and began to drag him towards the door. "Always a delicate creature," said the ghost, "but she had a large heart." "So she had," said Scrooge. "You're right." "She died a woman," said the ghost, "and had children." "One child," Scrooge said with a nod. "True," said the ghost, "your nephew." Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind and answered, "Yes." At that moment they disappeared from the school and were now in the busy streets of a city. It was clear by the decorations of the shops that it was Christmas time again. But it was evening, and the streets were lit up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door, and asked Scrooge if he knew it. Know it? I was an apprentice here. They went inside. At the sight of the old gentleman in the woolen cap sitting behind a high desk, Scrooge cried in great excitement, "Why, it's old Fezziwig, bless his heart! It's Fezziwig alive again!" Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his waistcoat, and laughed from his shoes to his head. He called out in a rich and happy voice, "Yo ho there, Ebenezer! Dick!" Scrooge's former self, now a young man, came in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice. "Dick Wilkins, to be sure," said Scrooge to the ghost. "There he is. He was very much attached to me." "Yo ho, my boys," said Fezziwig. "No more work tonight. It's Christmas Eve. Let's close the shutters up," he said, with a sharp clap of his hands. You wouldn't believe how those two young fellows went at all. They quickly ran about putting everything away and came back, panting like race horses. "Hello!" cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from his high desk with wonderful agility. "Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here." In a minute the floor was swept and washed, the lamps were lit, and wood was heaped upon the fire. The warehouse was as snug, warm, dry, and bright a ballroom as you would hope to see on a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, smiling. In came the 3 Fezziwig daughters, beaming and lovable. In came all the young men and women employed by the business. In they all came, one after another. And away they all went, 20 couples at once, hand in hand, dancing for a long time. There were many dances and games and more dances, and there was cake and a great piece of roast, and there were mince pies and plenty of drinks. But the greatest fun of the evening came when the fiddler played a tune called Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood up to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig, and dance they did. When the clock struck 11, this gathering broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their positions, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person as he or she went out, wished them a Merry Christmas. Thus the cheerful voices died away, and the 2 lads were left to their beds, which were in the back shop. During the whole of this time Scrooge had been full of joy. His heart and soul were fully in the scene, watching his former self. He remembered everything, enjoyed everything. It was not until later that he remembered he was there with the ghost. "Such a small thing to do," said the ghost, "to make these silly folks so grateful." "Small," echoed Scrooge. He had spent a few pounds of your mortal money. Is that so much that he deserves this praise? The spirit motioned for him to listen to the 2 apprentices, who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig. "It isn't that," said Scrooge, and speaking more like his younger self. "The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune." He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. "What is the matter?" asked the ghost. "Nothing," said Scrooge. "Something, I think." "No, Oh, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all." His younger self turned down the lamps, and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air. "My time with you grows short," observed the spirit. "Quick." This was not addressed to Scrooge, or to anyone he could see, but it produced an immediate effect. Again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of his life. His face did not have the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to show the signs of care and greed. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young woman, in whose eyes there were tears, which sparkled in the light that shined out of the ghost of Christmas past. "It doesn't matter," she said, "especially to you. Another idol has taken my place in your heart, and if it can cheer and comfort you through the rest of your days, as I have tried to do, I have no reason to be sad." "What idol has replaced you?" he said. "A golden one." "This is the way of the world, Belle," Scrooge said. "There is nothing as hard as poverty." "You fear the world too much," she answered. "All your other hopes have merged into the hope of not being poor. I have seen your better qualities leave you one by one, until only one, desire, profit, remains." "What then?" he answered. "I have grown much wiser, but so what? I have not changed my feelings toward you." She shook her head. "Have I?" "Our promise to wed each other was made when we were both poor and content to be so, until we could improve our station in life through our work in due time. You have changed. When we made our promise, you were another man. I was a boy. You are not what you once were, but I am. We were one, but now we are two. So I release you." "Have I ever wanted release from you?" "In words, no, never." "In what then?" "In your changed nature, in everything that made my love of any worth or value to you. If we had never made a promise to wed, would you seek me out and try to win me now?" "No." "You think I would not?" "I would gladly think otherwise if I could," she answered. "But if you were free today, would you choose me, a penniless girl? I know you will regret it. So I release you with a full heart for the love of the man you once were." He was about to speak, but with her head turned from him, she continued, "You may feel pain, but soon you will gladly forget it. May you be happy in the life you have chosen." She left him, and they parted. "Spirits," said Scrooge, "show me no more. Take me home. Why do you delight to torture me?" "One shadow more," exclaimed the ghost. "No more, no more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more." But the ghost took him in both arms and forced him to watch what happened next. They were in another place, a room not very large, but full of comfort. Near the winter fire sat a beautiful woman sitting with her daughter. There were more children there, running around them wildly. The mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much. But now there was a knocking at the door, and the mother came to greet the father, who came home with many Christmas toys and presents. There were shouts of wonder and delight with every package that they opened. Little by little the children began to settle down, and one stair at a time, up to the top of the house to their beds they went. The man sat down with his daughter and her mother at the fireside. "Belle," said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile, "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon." "Who was it?" guess." "I don't know," she added in the same breath, laughing as he laughed. "Mr. Scrooge." Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and he had a candle inside. His partner Jacob Marley lies at the point of death, I hear, and there he sat, quite alone in the world, I believe. "Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "I told you these were shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost. "They are what they are. Do not blame me. Remove me. I cannot bear it." He turned to the ghost, wrestling with it. "Leave me. Take me back. Haunt me no longer." In the struggle, Scrooge saw that its light was burning high and bright, and he seized the cap and pressed it down upon the ghost's head. The spirit shrunk underneath it, so that the cap covered it entirely. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light which streamed out from under it. He was aware of being exhausted and overcome by drowsiness, and of being back in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, and had barely time to fall into bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Stave 3, the second of the three spirits. Awakening in the middle of a snore and sitting up in bed, Scrooge felt that he'd woken up in the nick of time to meet with the second spirit. He kept a sharp lookout all around the bed. He did not wish to be taken by surprise. He was ready for almost any strange appearance, and nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have astonished him. But when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he started to tremble. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time he lay on his bed under a blaze of light that was somehow more alarming than a dozen ghosts, since he was powerless to understand what it meant or what it might do. At last, however, he began to think that the source of this ghostly light might be in the next room, so he got up and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by name and asked him to enter. He obeyed. It was his own room. There was no doubt about it. But he'd undergone a surprising change. The walls and ceiling were hung with living green, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, and a mighty fire went roaring up the chimney. Heaped up on the floor like a throne were turkeys, geese, hunks of meat, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense cakes, and bowls of hot punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. Sitting happily on this couch was a jolly giant, glorious to see, who held up high a glowing torch. Come in," exclaimed the ghost. "Come in and know me better, man." Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before this spirit. Though the spirit's eyes were clear and kind, he did not want to look at them. "I am the ghost of Christmas present," said the spirit. "Look upon me." The ghost was clothed in one simple green robe, bordered with white fur, which hung loosely on him. Its feet were also bare, and on its head wore a holly wreath, set there and there with shining icicle. Its dark brown curls of hair were long and free as its pleasant face. Its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, and its joyful manner. Worn around its middle was an antique sword sheath holding no sword, but which was eaten up with rust. How? You have never seen the likes of me before, exclaimed the spirit. Never, Scrooge admitted. Have you never walked with the younger members of my family? Asked the phantom. I don't think I have, said Scrooge. Have you many brothers, spirit? More than 1,800, said the ghost. A tremendous family to provide for, muttered Scrooge. The ghost of Christmas present rose. Spirit, said Scrooge submissively, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night because I had to, and I learned a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have anything to teach me, let me gain something from it. Touch my robe. Scrooge did as he was told and held it tightly. All the greenery and food vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, and the hour of night. They stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, where the people made a rough but lively and pleasant kind of music, in shoveling the snow from the pavement in front of their homes and from the roofs of their houses. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with a mist, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had caught fire at once, and were blazing away to their heart's content. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet there was a feeling of great cheerfulness. For the people were happy and full of glee, calling out to one another, and now and then throwing snowballs and laughing. The shops were still open, glowing radiantly. There were great round baskets of chestnuts at the doors. There were broad Spanish onions. There were pears and apples stacked up like pyramids. There were bunches of grapes dangled from hooks so that people's mouths might water as they passed them. There were piles of filbert nuts, recalling, in their fragrance, ancient walks in the woods and pleasant wanderings through withered leaves. There were small and juicy Norfolk apples, urgently asking to be carried home in paper bags and eaten after dinner. Oop, skipped a page. Can't do that. There we go. It wasn't just that the scales on the counter made a merry sound, or that the blended scents of tea and coffee were pleasing to the nose, or that the raisins were plentiful, the almonds extremely white, the sticks of cinnamon long and straight, nor was it that the candied fruits were so spotted with melted sugar that they made the coldest onlookers feel feverish, nor that the figs were moist and pulpy, the French plums blushed from their highly decorated boxes, or that everything was good to eat and in its Christmas dressing. It was that the customers were so full of hope in the promise of the day, and the grocer and his people were so sincere and kind that the polished metal hearts they used to fasten their aprons on around their backs might have been their own hearts, worn on the outside. But soon the steeples called people to church and chapel, and away they went, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their happiest faces. And at the same time there emerged from dozens of side streets and lanes countless people, each carrying their Christmas dinners to the bakers' shops to cook, for they didn't have their own proper ovens. The sight of these poor revelers appeared to interest the spirit very much. Scrooge and the ghost went on, invisible, into the suburbs of the town. It was a remarkable quality of the ghost that despite his gigantic size, he could move himself to any place with ease, and that he stood beneath a low roof quite as gracefully as he could have done in any great hall. Perhaps it was the ghost's kind and generous nature and his sympathy with all poor men that led him to Scrooge's clerk's home. He took Scrooge with him, and at the door the spirit smiled, and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinkling of his torch. Bob made only 15 shillings a week, and yet the ghost of Christmas present found him worthy enough to bless his small 4-roomed house. Up rose Mrs. Cratchit, Bob's wife, dressed poorly in a patched gown, but rich in ribbons, which are inexpensive but look nice. And she laid out the tablecloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, and also oh, also wearing ribbons. There. Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of a potato, and now 2 smaller Cratchits, a boy and a girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelled the goose, and knew that it was their own. So, thinking pleasant thoughts of sage and onion, these young Cratchits danced around the table, while Peter blew the fire, until the slow potatoes, bubbling up, knocked loudly at the saucepan lid to be let out and peeled. What has ever got your father, then? Said Mrs. Cratchit. And your brother, Tiny Tim, and Martha wasn't as late last Christmas Day. I'm here, mother, said the girl, appearing as she spoke. Here's Martha, mother, cried the 2 young Cratchits. Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are, said Mrs. Cratchit, kissing her and taking off her shawl and bonnet. We had a lot of work to finish up last night, replied the girl, and had to clear away this morning, mother. Well, never mind, so long as you are home, said Mrs. Cratchit. Sit down before the fire, my dear, and warm up. Then their father, Bob, came in with at least 3 feet of scarf, not counting the fringe, hanging down in front of him. His threadbare clothes were mended, while Tiny Tim sat on his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch, and had his legs supported by metal braces. Martha ran to his arms, while the 2 young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim, and took him into the wash-house. And how did little Tim behave? asked Mrs. Cratchit. As good as gold, said Bob, and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in church, because he was a cripple, and it might be good for them to remember on Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Bob's voice was sad when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. Tim's little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back he came before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool by the fire. Bob poured some hot mixture into a mug with gin and lemons, and stirred it round and put it on the shelf above the fire to simmer. Peter and the 2 young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, which they soon returned with, carrying it as if they were in a royal procession. There was such excitement that you might have thought a goose was the rarest of all birds. And in truth it was something very much like it in that house. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy hissing hot. Peter mashed the potatoes. Miss Belinda sweetened up the applesauce. Martha dusted off the plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner of the table. The two young Cratchits set chairs for everybody, not forgetting themselves, and crammed spoons into their mouths so they wouldn't shriek for goose before their turn came to be served. At last the dishes were set on, and grace was said. There was a breathless pause as Mrs. Cratchit, looking at the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the cooked bird. But when she did, and when the long expected gush of stuffing issued forth, there was a murmur of delight around the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife, and feebly crying, "Hurrah!" Bob said he didn't believe there was ever such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavor, size for its cheapness, were the themes of admiration. Accompanied by apple sauce and mashed potatoes, it was enough dinner for the whole family. Indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight, they had eaten it all. Yet everyone had had enough, and the youngest Cratchits in particular was stuffed with sage and onion to the eyebrows. But now Miss Belinda changed the plates, and Mrs. Cratchit nervously left the room to get the pudding. What if it wasn't cooked enough? What if it broke when dishing it out of its copper pot? What if somebody had gotten over the wall of the backyard and stolen it? All sorts of horrors were considered while she was retrieving the pudding. Hello! A great deal of steam. The pudding was out of the copper pot. A smell like an eating house, and a pastry cook's being next door to each other, with a laundressness next door to that. That was the pudding. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit entered, smiling proudly with the pudding, like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, burning in a splash of ignited brandy, and bedecked with Christmas holly stuck into the top. "Oh, a wonderful pudding!" Bob Cratchit said, and calmly, too, that he believed it to be the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit said that now the weight was off her mind. She could confess she'd had her doubts about the amount of flour. Ever nothing to say about it, but nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family. It would have been simply rude to do so. At last the dinner was all done, the cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The drink in the jug being tasted and considered perfect, apples and oranges were put on the table, and a shovelful of chestnuts on the fire to roast. Then all the Cratchit family drew around the hearth in what Bob Cratchit called a circle, meeting half of one, and at Bob Cratchit's elbow stood the family display of glass, 2 tumblers, and a custard cup without a handle. These held the hot drink from the jug, however, just as well as golden goblets would have done. Bob served it out with beaming looks, while the chestnuts on the fire sputtered and crackled noisily. Then Bob proposed, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us." All the family repeated the words. "God us. Every one." I think that's supposed to be "God bless us, everyone," said Tiny Tim, the last of all. Sometimes books makes mistakes. It's okay. He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand. He loved the child and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him. "Spirit," said Scrooge with an interest he had never felt before, "tell me if Tiny Tim will live." "I see a vacant seat," replied the ghost, "in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die. No, said Scrooge. Oh, no. Kind spirit, say he will be spared. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my kind will find him here. What then, if he is to die? He had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit, and was overcome with guilt and grief. Man, if a man you really are, hold off on those wicked words until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide who shall live and who shall die? It may be that in the eyes of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. Scrooge bent before the ghost's rebuke, and trembling he cast his gaze to the ground, but he raised them speedily on hearing his own name. Mr. Scrooge, said Bob. A toast to Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. The founder of the feast, indeed, cried Mrs. Cratchit, reddening. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it. My dear, said Bob, the children. Christmas Day. It should be Christmas Day, I am sure, said she, on which one drinks the health of such a horrible, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow. My dear, was Bob's mild answer. Christmas Day. I'll drink his health for your sake, and the day's, said Mrs. Cratchit, but not for his. Long life to him. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very airy and very happy, I have no doubt. Very merry. They made another mistake. The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their celebrations which had no enthusiasm. Tiny Tim drank last, but he didn't care at all for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for a full 5 minutes. But after it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before. From the mere relief of talking about Scrooge being over, Bob Cratchit told them how he had a job in mind for Peter, which would bring in full 5 and 6 pence weekly, and 2 young Cratchits laughed tremendously at the idea of Peter being a man of business, and Peter himself looked thoughtfully at the fire, as if he were thinking about what he would buy when he started earning that income. Martha, who was a poor apprentice at a hat maker's, then told them what kind of work she had to do, and how many hours she worked at a stretch, and how she meant to lie in bed tomorrow morning for a good long rest. Tomorrow being a holiday she could have at home. At this time the chestnuts and the jug went round and round, and by the by they had a song about a lost child traveling in the snow, from Tiny Tim, who had a sad little voice and sang it very well indeed. There was nothing of high society in this gathering. They were not a wealthy family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof, and their clothes were old. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded, they looked even happier in the bright sprinklings of the spirit's torch as he and Scrooge departed. Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. By this time it was getting dark and snowing heavily, And as Scrooge and the spirit went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires in kitchens, parlors, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful. Here the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cozy dinner, with hot plates baking in front of the fire, and deep red curtains ready to be drawn to shut out the cold and darkness. There all the children of the house running out into the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, and be the first to greet them. Here, again, were the shadows of gathering guests on the window blinds. It was a great surprise to Scrooge to hear a hearty laugh. It was a much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room, with the ghost standing smiling by his side and looking at that same nephew. Ha 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 ha! Laughed Scrooge's nephew. When he laughed in this way, holding his sides, rolling his head, and twisting his face, Scrooge's niece by marriage laughed as heartily as he, and their assembled friends laughed as well. He said that Christmas was a humbug, cried Scrooge's nephew. He believed it too. More shame for him, Fred, said Scrooge's niece. He's a comical old fellow, that's the truth, and not as pleasant as he might be. However, his offenses carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him. I'm sure he is very rich, Fred, hinted Scrooge's niece. At least you will always tell me so. Well, what of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do any good with it. He doesn't even make himself comfortable with it. He doesn't seem to want to benefit us with it. I have no patience with him, observed Scrooge's niece. Her sisters and all the other ladies expressed the same opinion. Oh, I have. I feel sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill attitude? Himself, always. Here he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He doesn't lose much of a dinner. Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner, interrupted Scrooge's niece. Everyone else said the same because they had just had dinner, and with the dessert on the table were clustered around the fire. Well, I'm very glad to hear you liked it, said Scrooge's nephew. He had another laugh. I was only going to say that the result of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us is that what he loses are these pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. But I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may hate Christmas until he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. If he finds me going there in a good mood year after year and saying, Uncle Scrooge, how are you? If he only puts him in the mind to leave his poor clerk £50, that's something. And I think I shook him yesterday. It was their turn to laugh now at the notion of his shaking Scrooge. He encountered them, or he encouraged them in their merriment. After tea they had some music. Scrooge's niece played well on the harp, and played a simple little song which had been familiar to the little girl, his sister, who fetched Scrooge from the boarding school, as Scrooge had been reminded by the ghost of Christmas past. When this music sounded, all the things that the ghost had shown him came back to his mind. He softened more and more, and thought that if he could have listened to it often years ago, he might have developed the kindness of life for his own happiness. But they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while they played games, for it was good to be children sometimes, and never better than Christmas. There was first a game of blind man's bluff. Scrooge's niece was not one of the blind man's bluff's party, but made herself comfortable with a large chair and a footstool in a snug corner, where the ghost and Scrooge were close behind her. But she joined in the other games, such as how, when, and where. There were 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge. He forgot that his voice made no sound in their ears. He sometimes spoke his guests quite loud, and very often guessed quite right, too. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and looked upon him with such favor that Scrooge begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guest departed. But this, the spirit said, could not be done. "Here's a new game," said Scrooge. "1/2 hour, spirit, please." It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what it is. He only answered their questions with yes or no. Players learned that he was thinking of an animal, or rather disagreeable animal, a savage animal, like an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talked sometimes, and lived in London, and walked about the streets. At every new question that was put to him, this nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter. At last one sister cried out, "I know what it is, Fred." "What is it?" asked Fred. "It's your Uncle Scrooge," which it certainly was. "He has given us plenty of merriment, I'm sure," said Fred, "and it would be ungrateful not to drink his health. I say to Uncle Scrooge." "Uncle Scrooge!" they cried. "A very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is," said Scrooge's nephew. "He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it nevertheless, Uncle Scrooge." Scrooge had become so happy and light of heart that he would have toasted the company in return, and thanked them, if the ghost had given him time. But the whole scene paused in the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew, and he and Spirit were again out on their travels. Much they saw, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. It was strange, for while Scrooge remained unchanged in his appearance, the ghost clearly grew older. Scrooge had seen this change and never spoke of it until they left the children's 12th night party. When looking at the spirit as they stood together in the open place, he noticed that its hair was gray. "Are spirits' lives so short?" asked Scrooge. "My life upon this globe is very brief," replied the ghost. "It ends tonight." "Tonight at midnight. Hark, the time is drawing near." The chimes were ringing the 3/4 past 11 at that moment. "Forgive me if I should not ask," said Scrooge, looking at the spirit's robe, "but I see something strange, and not belonging to you, under your robe. Is it a foot or a claw?" "It might be a claw, for there is flesh on it," was the spirit's sorrowful reply. "Look here." From the foldings of his robe it brought 2 children, wretched, frightful, hideous, and miserable. They knelt down at its feet and clung to the outside of its garment. "Oh, man, look down here," exclaimed the ghost. There were a boy and a girl, yellow, ragged, scowling, wolfish. They should have looked like graceful youths, but instead they looked like monsters, horrible and dreadful. Scrooge started back, appalled. Having seen them, he tried to say they were fine children, but the words could not come out of him. It would have been a terrible lie. "Spirit, are they yours?" Scrooge could say no more. "They are humanity's," said the spirit, looking down upon them, "and they cling to me. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware of them both and all of their kind. But most of all, beware this boy, for on his brow I see that doom is written, unless the writing can be erased, cried the spirit, stretching out his hand towards the city. Have they no refuge or resources? Cried Scrooge. There are there no prisons? Said the spirit, turning on him for the last time with his own words. Are there no workhouses? The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked around him for the ghost, but no longer saw it. As the last toll of the bell ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, he saw a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground toward him. Stave 4, the last of the spirits. The phantom slowly, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down on his knee, for in the air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which hid its face, which hid its head, its face, its form, leaving nothing visible except one outstretched hand. Its mysterious presence filled Scrooge with dread, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come? Said Scrooge. The spirit didn't answer, but pointed onward with its hand. You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the future, Scrooge pursued. Is that so, spirit? The upper portion of the garment moved for an instant, as if the spirit had nodded its head. That was the only answer he received. Although he was used to ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the ghost's silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand as he prepared to follow it. The spirit paused a moment, as if observing his condition and giving him time to recover. But this only made Scrooge more afraid. It filled him with horror to know that behind the dark shroud there were ghostly eyes watching him. Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be a better person than I was, I am prepared to bear your company and be grateful for it. Will you not speak to me? He gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. Lead on, said Scrooge. The night is going fast, and time is precious to me. The phantom moved away. Scrooge followed him in the shadow of its garment, which lifted him up and carried him along. They were soon in the heart of the city, at the exchange, and among the merchants who hurried up and down and chinked money in their pockets. They talked in groups and looked at their watches, as Scrooge had often seen them do. The spirit stopped beside one group of businessmen. Observing that the spirit's hand was pointing to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. No, said one man, I don't know much about it. I only know he's dead. When did he die? Inquired another. Last night, I believe. Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die. God knows, said the first with a yawn. What has he done with the money? Asked the red-faced gentleman. I haven't heard, said the first man. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know. They all laughed. I don't know of anybody who will go to his funeral. Suppose we volunteer. I don't mind going if lunch is provided. But I must be fed. Another laugh. Scrooge knew the men and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The phantom continued to glide onto a street. Its finger pointed to two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation might be there. He knew these men also. They were men of business, very wealthy and of great importance. He had made a point to always look good in front of them. "Well," said the first, "old Scratch has got his own at last." "So I'm told." "Cold, isn't it?" "Normal for Christmas time." That was the extent of their conversation. Scrooge was at first surprised that the spirits should attach importance to conversations apparently so meaningless, but he decided that they must have some hidden purpose. They couldn't be about Marley, for that was past, and this ghost was for the future, nor could he think of anyone he knew that it might be, but he assumed there was some moral for his own improvement, and decided to take in every word he heard and everything he saw. Quiet and dark, the phantom stood beside him with its outstretched hand. They went into an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never gone before, although he recognized it and its bad reputation. The streets were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people drunken and ugly. The whole place reeked with crime, filth, and misery. In this place there was an old shop where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and other things were brought. On the floor inside it were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and iron of all kinds. Sitting by a charcoal stove made of old bricks was a gray-haired old rascal. Just then a woman with a heavy bundle came into the shop, but she had hardly entered when another woman came in too, and she was closely followed by a man dressed in faded black. All three burst into a laugh. "Look here, old Joe," one woman said. "We've all met here without meaning to." "You couldn't have met in a better place," said old Joe. "Come in." The parlor was the space behind a screen of rags. The woman who had spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat down on a stool, crossing her arms and looking at the other two. "What, Mrs. Dibbler? Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did." "That's true indeed." "No man more so." "Very well, then. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose." "No, indeed," said Mrs. Dibbler, laughing. Dilber. "If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, the wicked old screw, why wasn't he nicer in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have something to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of dying grasping out for his breath last there all by himself." "It's the truest word that ever was spoken," said Mrs. Dilber. "It's a judgment on him." "I wish I would have taken more," replied the woman. "Open that bundle first, Joe, and let me know the value of it." The man produced his plunder. It was not much. Each item was examined and appraised by old Joe, who added up the sums he was willing to give for each on the wall and added them to the total. "That's the amount," said Joe, "and I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next?" Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, some clothing, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her amount was written on the wall in the same manner. "I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine. And that's how I ruin myself," said old Joe. "And now undo my bundle, Joe," said the first woman. "What do you call this?" said Joe as he unfastened the bundle. "Bed curtains?" "Ah," returned the woman, laughing and leaning forward on her crossed arms. "Bed curtains. You don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with Him lying there, said Joe. Yes, I do. Why not? His blankets? Who else do you think? He didn't like to get cold without 'em anyway. I dare he isn't likely to get cold without 'em, I dare say. There we go. I hope he didn't die of anything contagious, said old Joe, stopping and looking up. Don't you be afraid of that. I ain't so fond of his company that I would have gone near him if he did. Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. His disgust for them couldn't have been greater if they were demons selling the corpse itself. Ha 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 ha, laughed the same woman. Because he frightened everyone else away when he was alive, we can take advantage of it now that he's dead. Spirit, said Scrooge, shuddering from head to foot. I see. The same thing that happened to this unhappy man could happen to me. Merciful heaven, what is this now? He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay something covered up. The room was too dark to see well, though Scrooge glanced around it, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light rising from outside fell straight on the bed, and on it, looted and empty, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced towards the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly laid that the slightest raising of it would reveal the face. Scrooge thought of lifting it, but he couldn't do it. This man lay in this dark, empty house, with not a man, a woman, or a child to say, he was kind to me, and for the memory of one kind word, I will be kind to him. Spirit, Scrooge said, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not forget its lesson. Trust me. Let us go. Still the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head. I understand you, Scrooge returned, and I would pull back the cover if I could, but I have no strength, Spirit. Again it seemed to look upon him. If there is any person in the town who feels emotion because of this man's death, said Scrooge, quite agonized, show that person to me, Spirit. I beg you, let me see some tenderness connected with a death. The ghost led him through several streets that were familiar to him, and as they went along, Scrooge looked everywhere for a glimpse of himself, but he was nowhere to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the same dwelling he'd visited before, and found the mother and the children seated quietly round the fire. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book. The mother and her daughters were sewing. And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard those words? He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out as he and the spirit entered. The mother laid her work on the table and put her hand up to her face. I wouldn't show sad eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It's about time that he should be here. Past it, rather, Peter answered, shutting his book. But I think he walks a little slower than he used to these last few evenings. They were quiet again. At last she said in a cheerful voice that only faltered once, I have known him to walk with Tiny Tim on his shoulder very fast indeed. And so have I, the children all said. But he was very light to carry, she continued, and your father loved him so that it was no trouble. There is your father at the door. She hurried to meet him. His dinner was ready for him. Then the two young Cratchits sat upon his knees, as if they were saying, Don't grieve, father. Bob was cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. "You went today, then, Robert?" said his wife. "Yes, my dear," returned Bob. "I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on Sundays." "My little child!" cried Bob. He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it, but soon he again accepted what had happened. They drew close to the fire and talked. Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he had only seen once, and who, meeting him in the street that day, and seeing that he looked a little down, asked what had happened to distress him. "So I told him. I'm so sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, and so I told him. I am so sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit," he said, "and so sorry for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way," he said, giving me his card, "that's where I live. Do come visit me." It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt for us. "I'm sure he's a good soul," said Mrs. Cratchit. "You would be even more sure of it, my dear," returned Bob, "if you saw and spoke to him. I shouldn't be at all surprised if he got Peter a better job." "Hear that, Peter?" said Mrs. Cratchit. "Though there's plenty of time for that, my dear," Bob said. "But however and whenever we part from one another, I am sure none of us will forget poor Tiny Tim." "Never, father!" they all cried. "And I know," said Bob, "I know, my dears, and we remember how patient and how mild he was, although he was only a little child. We shall not argue among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim." "No, never, father!" they all cried again. "I am very happy," said Bob. "I am very happy." Mrs. Cratchit kissed him, his daughters kissed him, the two young Cratchits kissed him, and Peter and Bob shook hands. "Spectre," said Scrooge, "something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead." The ghost of Christmas yet to come took him, as before, into the places of business men, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, until Scrooge motioned for him to wait a moment. "This courtyard," said Scrooge, "is where my place of business is. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come." The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere. "My office is there," Scrooge exclaimed. "Why do you point away?" The finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was still an office, but not his. The furniture was not the same. The figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again and accompanied it until they reached an iron gate. He paused to look around before entering. A church cemetery. Here, then, the wretched man whose name he had now to learn lay underneath the ground. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Scrooge advanced towards it, trembling. "Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point," said Scrooge, "answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, for certain, or are they the shadows of things that only might be?" Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. Men's courses of action in life predict certain results, which in their behavior doesn't change, will certainly happen, said Scrooge. But if the courses are changed, the ends will change. Say this is true with what you show me? The spirit only pointed. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and read on the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I that man who lay upon the bed? He cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. No, spirit, no. The finger was still there. Spirit, he cried, tight clutching at his robe, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I would have been. Why show me this if I am past all hope? For the first time the hand appeared to shake. Good spirit, he pursued as he fell down on the ground in front of it. Your nature pities me. Assure me that I, by living a changed life, may yet change these shadows you have shown me. The hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall live within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may wipe away the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It tried to free itself, but he was strong and held on. The spirit, stronger yet, finally pushed him away. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw a change in the phantom's shape. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Stave 3. The end of it. Yes, and the bedpost was his own, the bed was his own, the room was his own. Best and happiest of all the time before him was his own, to use to fix the wrongs he had done. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated, and he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and Christmas time be praised for this. He could scarcely get out the words. Just minutes ago he had been sobbing violently with the spirit. His face was still wet with tears. They are not torn down, cried Scrooge, looking at his bed curtains. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that might be can still be prevented. They will be. I know they will. I don't know what to do, cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath, and making a perfect fool of himself. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to the world. He had skipped into the sitting room out of breath. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Ha ha ha! It was a splendid laugh, the first of many. I don't know what day of the month it is, said Scrooge. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite like a baby. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Going to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, just clear, bright, happy cold. Golden sunlight, blue skies, sweet fresh air, merry bells, glorious. What's today? He cried, calling down to a boy in Sunday clothes. Eh? Returned the boy. What's today, my fine fellow? Said Scrooge. Today? Replied the boy. Why, Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day, said Scrooge to himself. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like, of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow. Hello, returned the boy. Do you know the poultry shop in the next street at the corner? Scrooge asked. I should hope I did, replied the lad. An intelligent boy, said Scrooge. A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? The big one? What? The one as big as me? What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, it's hanging there now, replied the boy. Is it? Go and buy it. Go on, exclaimed the boy. No, I mean it. Go and buy it and have them bring it here so I can tell them where to take it. Come back with the turkey and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with it in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown. The boy was off like a shot. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's, said Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. He won't know who sends it. He wrote out the address and went downstairs to open the door, ready for the coming of the delivery man with the turkey. As he stood there, the knocker caught his eye. I shall love it as long as I live, cried Scrooge, patting it with his hand. I scarcely ever looked at it before. Here's the turkey. Hello, how are you? Merry Christmas! It was quite a turkey, so fat it could have never stood upon its own legs. Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a carriage. He chuckled when he said this. He chuckled when he paid for the turkey. He chuckled when he paid for the carriage. And he chuckled when he paid the boy. He sat down breathless in his chair again and chuckled until he cried. He dressed himself all in his best and got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring out of their homes, as he had seen them with the ghosts of Christmas present. Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He looked so pleasant that 3 or 4 fellows said, Good morning, sir. A Merry Christmas to you. And Scrooge decided that all the happy sounds he had ever heard, those were the happiest in his ears. He had not gone far when he saw the gentleman who had walked into his office the day before and said, Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. He worried how they would look upon him when they met. My dear sir, said Scrooge, taking the first gentleman by both his hands, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir. Mr. Scrooge? Yes, that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. And will you accept? Here Scrooge whispered in his ear. Bless me, cried the gentleman, as if his breath were taken away. My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious? If you please, not a penny less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor? My dear sir, said the other man, shaking hands with him, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, please, said Scrooge. Will you come and see me? I will, cried the old gentleman, and it was clear he meant to do it. Thank you. I am much obliged to you. Bless you. He went to the church and walked out about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro and patted children on the head and questioned beggars and looked down into the kitchen of houses and up to the windows and found that everything gave him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk could bring him so much happiness. In the afternoon he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he did it. Is the man of the house at home, my dear? Said Scrooge to the housekeeping girl who answered. Yes, sir. Where is he? Said Scrooge. He's in the dining room, sir, along with the lady. I'll show you upstairs, if you please. Thank you. He knows me, said Scrooge, with his hand already on the dining room lock. I'll go in here, my dear. He turned in gently and looked in around the door. Fred, said Scrooge. Goodness, how his niece was startled by the sight of his face. Scrooge had forgotten for a moment that she would be sitting right there in the corner with the footstool. Why, bless my soul, cried Fred. Who's that? It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred? Let him in. It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. Scrooge was right at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same as he'd seen her with the spirit. So did everyone else when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful happiness. Despite the late night, he was early at the office the next morning. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late, that was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9, no Bob. 1/4 past, no Bob. He was a full 18 minutes and a half late. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come in. Bob's hat was off before he opened the door. He was on his stool in a jiffy, writing away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. Hello, growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, as near as he could fake it. What do you mean by coming here at this time of day? I am very sorry, sir. I am behind my time. You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please. It's only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir. Now, I'll tell you what, my friend. I am not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, he continued, leaping from his stool and pointing at Bob, and therefore I am going to raise your salary. Bob trembled and was very confused. A Merry Christmas, Bob, said Scrooge, with an honesty that could not be mistaken, as he slapped him on the back. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, that I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon, after a warm-up of Christmas punch. Make up the fires and buy another sack of coal before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and much more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was like a second father. He became as good a friend and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city or town in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the change in him, but he let them laugh, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened in this world for good, at which some people did not laugh at first. His own little heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further meetings with spirits, but ever afterwards it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us and all of us, and so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.